come to you in the next 20
Good afternoon, everyone. We also have, just to give you some housekeeping tips or updates, we have an online community joining us today. Dr. Aisha Haynes is monitoring that chat, and she has worked with Samuel Neeson to ensure that they are connected with what we're doing here today. I welcome you to the Center of Teaching and Excellence. And today we have Samuel Neeson. He is a presidential fellow and PhD candidate at the University of South Carolina. He practiced law full-time for 6 years before pursuing his doctorate degree in geography. I'm going to turn it over to Samuel. We welcome you and we appreciate having you.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank Xavier Hopkins for allowing me to be able to be here today with you. Also, Dr. Aisha Haynes on the online moderation, and also Helena Johnson, who's doing the recording and the live stream. So at some points, I really want to encourage you to participate and engage in discussion here. Just as a reminder, though, because we do have folks online, we have a microphone that we can, again, pass around. I believe there are also actually different mics on the desk as well, so just be mindful of that. We do have an online community participating today, and we welcome them here as well. So for today, and when we think of, diversity and classroom discussions, I want to cover a few different areas of that as it relates to what we are doing as instructors. One is fostering diverse discussions. How can we have these discussions, have variety in our discussions, both in terms of participants, of viewpoints? We're going to be talking about that, different tools that we can use. And also throughout this, please, again, share your comments on what you have found to be successful or not successful. And when you do, so we all can know, just please say your name when you're first speaking. That way we can, again, get to know each other somewhat, even though it's more of a short time here. We're going to talk specifically about our own viewpoints and their effect on discussions, how it plays out in the classroom setting. Third, we're going to finish with a question and answer session that will basically be a discussion among all of us here about some of the things we've talked about today, about your own experiences, maybe struggles that you may have that others in here can help to resolve that issue and make it a better teaching experience for you and for your students ultimately. That's what we're here to do. We're here ultimately to help the students. And so with that, I want to start with this quote of helping the students. This quote comes from Nassim Taleb. He's a Lebanese-born statistician. He's engaged in stocks, all sorts of things. A brilliant man. But he wrote a book. And in the preface, he says, "Wind extinguishes a candle and energizes fire. You want to be the fire and wish for the wind." Here, in our discussion, hopefully we'll be able to figure out how we can be wind for our students, help them be the fire, and we provide the wind to help them grow in their academic career and pursuits. Let's start with our own discussion. We're going to watch a brief introduction of this. It comes from North Carolina, so neighboring state to the north. As you watch this, you may have heard of this situation before, possibly not, but we're going to have a discussion ourselves about it.
After a professor asked her international students to only speak English on campus, Director of Graduate Studies Megan Neely sent an email out to more than 50 students on Friday. It said in part that students were encouraged to use English 100% of the time when they are in a professional setting. Well, several students took offense to the message, and the university vice president says the email should have never been sent.
Under no circumstances should any student feel or be discriminated against because of the language that they speak outside of the classroom.
Now, Neely has voluntarily stepped down from her director position, but is still teaching as an assistant professor. The dean of the School of Medicine is requesting a thorough review of the biostatistics program.
So that's the situation. Here's a copy of the email. But the question then comes to you, because this was the equivalent of a Twitter storm in China. On Weibo, I don't know if I'm saying that exactly right, but that's the Chinese version of Twitter. Over 130 million people saw this, commented on it, and were making their own conclusions about it. So for us here today, we had a brief introduction, at least, of the issue. I want to take in the proposition that was made by many on Weibo, that the professor, not the professors, not just the one who wrote the email, but the professors there were racist for saying you only can speak Chinese. And I'm going to ask you to move around just temporarily. I know you're getting comfortable with where you're at, but I want you to move in the four corners of the room. And this is again as you're facing it. So in this corner right here will be the somewhat agree. That corner will be the somewhat disagree, the disagree, and the agree with this proposition. Our online community, you see up there, we're not going to think you're yelling or screaming. Just state your position in all caps so it can quickly be seen, and you can follow the thread of those who you are in a smaller discussion group with. We're breaking into, again, a little smaller discussion group, so go ahead and do that. Take a few minutes, and again, organize yourselves. Here is as well the email that you can read. But go ahead and take a couple minutes and talk with those who are in that same, again, mindset. Strongly, somewhat agree, somewhat disagree, disagree, strongly agree. Yeah. All right, so
But I just
we've been able to meet with different folks.
easier for them to discuss something.
Discuss.
Right. Not because they
Yeah, do a
didn't
little
want me to listen.
debrief.
Yeah.
On this. Again, we can flip back, of course, to the email. But what are some of the main conclusions? Maybe some who, for example, who wants to start? You just say your name, what group, and kind of the discussion. Yes.
Can we get to the mic first?
Yes, please.
Hi, Becky Moore. I have a hard time, I had a hard time digesting the whole situation to even come to one conclusion about anything at all about that. I heard a lot of people saying, I can't even imagine sending an email like that. Yeah, I totally agree. But the overlying question you asked us to assess was, all Duke professors are racist.
Sorry, I should have clarified. The professors who were saying you should speak English only.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah.
My bad on that one.
But even still, even digesting that all the people that were in that room were making that decision to send that email, that is too strong, right? Because one person sent the email, and even though she may have shared some of the same interest, whether we all agree or not, she sent the email. So all 3, 5, 10, whoever was in the room didn't send the email. So it's even hard to break down all of who, do you see what I'm saying?
I understand that. So it's the 3 professors, the 2 who made this request to her, and then her. That was what basically the accusation was on Weibo. So Becky, which group were you in?
I wasn't.
Oh, you weren't? Oh, sorry. Again, that's good for me to know.
Digesting.
Sorry about that, Becky. Okay. Others? Yes.
Okay. What was most troubling, there's a mic on the table.
Yes.
What was most troubling to me was the fact that these faculty members overheard Chinese students having a conversation and then sought the grad director or whatever her title was, sought her out to get more information, including the names about those students, for the implied purpose of not hiring and refusing to work with them in the future. That was the part before the bolded part, so if you didn't take the time to read it carefully, you might have missed. So saying these students are Chinese students speaking Chinese, and that bothers me, therefore I'm gonna hunt them down, I'm gonna get their names, so I will not work with them in the future, that's discrimination. To me, it would be one thing to say, you're here, you should immerse yourself in the language. Like, that's some professionalization, trying to give good advice. But that is, in fact, not what those 2 faculty members were doing. They were saying, I want to avoid these students and not support them.
And so, Bethany, which group were you in?
I was in agree.
Okay, agree. So we've heard agree. The one, unfortunately, I caused the confusion. Sorry about that, Becky. Other thoughts? Who about someone, maybe the things that were being shared around, maybe the disagree group? Yes.
So,
And it's Kristen.
so part of, I think, was the confusion. So we were thinking about the generalization to all professors at Duke. And that was what the basis of our conversation was. And that it's not fair to take these 3 professors and generalize it, that makes every professor at Duke in different departments and different, on the medical campus versus the main campus as racist.
Does it change realizing it's talking about these three specific, the two who commented and then the grad director?
For me, it does, but I can't speak to anyone else.
I hear you. So you would shift from the somewhat agree to the agree camp?
Well, I was in disagree.
Disagree. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
right. You were. Which one does that change at all, or you still
I
disagree?
still have to process it a little more.
Okay. Any other thoughts? And we can go back to the email. I realize there's a bunch on the slide, but they're saying the gist of it is there were some Chinese students speaking in Chinese in the break room. They were talking very loudly and in Chinese. Two professors went to the grad director and said, hey, we don't want to work with these people. Let us know who their names are because we don't like what they're doing. She then sends an email out saying, please, please, please keep these unintended consequences from happening because the professors were disappointed that they were not taking the opportunity to improve their English. Can you see, if you look at the other side, why then is this statement being made? Think back to your conversations that you had, and I recognize there's been some confusion, unfortunately, from the way I set it up. What would be perhaps a reason when the ultimate conclusion is, I encourage you to commit using English 100% of the time when you're in a Hawk or another professional setting? Why would the grad director, she's not saying she wouldn't work with people. She's transmitting a message to others and saying, why don't you speak in English? Yes, your name, please?
Victoria.
Victoria, and we have a microphone.
So I think what you're getting at is like the essential implication is that in order to be professional and successful, the language that you need to be using is standard American English. And like if you are using something other than that, then the people who are hiring you, the people who are perceiving you as professional or hireable are not going to perceive you as such, or are not going to perceive you as like as intelligent or as successful as the other students in the building. Is that right?
I'm just trying to understand what are all the points. Why would they have said something like this? On the online community, do we have some comments there?
Yes, Kristen noted that she found the general tone of the email to be rather rude, bold, and can underline all caps, rampant, and almost feels like the email sender is treating the students like children, and the people agreed with that statement.
Okay. So I think with this, again, I'm trying to, and unfortunately, perhaps set up again the best, what would be the different reasons? What could be going through the thoughts at the time? What was the ultimate thing? Yes, two said we're not going to work with them. What was the point of this professor's email? Is she saying don't speak English at all? Or don't speak Chinese at all?
I think they were trying to protect them. But I was in the agree group, and we were saying, one of the things that we were saying, we were wondering if an email like that would have gone out if this had been somebody speaking in German or in French. That we consider, I don't know what the term you used. Did you say it was cosmopolitan? Or?
I was thinking
So,
like
something like that. We were thinking that an email like that would not have gone out. She might have had good intentions, but unfortunately, that doesn't protect you from not being racist.
Okay.
So.
And your name, sorry?
Catherine.
All right, Catherine. So you were agree, disagree? Has it changed?
No, I'm fully in the agree group.
Okay. So the main conclusion, we just talked about that, different parts. Does it change after reading email or my, unfortunately, having to recontextualize that email? Did that change at all? Any of your perceptions, your beliefs, or opinions on it? Have any of you lived abroad? In a country where you had to speak other than English, anything other than English? What was it like?
It was fine. I mean, people would just, my accent was not good, and so they would just be like, oh, you speak English, I'm just going to talk to you in English. So it was, I was trying to learn Spanish at the time. I was living in Madrid, and I didn't quite get the immersion because I was in a cosmopolitan city such as Madrid. So many people spoke English, and it was just like I don't even want to deal with you trying to fumble through whatever you're trying to say in Spanish, so let me just meet you where you're at. And in some ways that was great, but I was also disappointed because I wanted to practice and like seem better. But
Basically losing the opportunity while you're there to be immersed
right.
in that. Other thoughts? I saw some other hands.
Yeah, I'm from Germany, and so it's similar to this. You speak English, nobody will bat an eyelash. Everybody will be excited, wanting to know where you're from. You speak an Eastern European language, Polish, a whole different story. Then you might get something like that, because there's a certain perception that comes along with being from Eastern Europe.
Does it depend on the context where you're at?
No? I mean, I guess it depends a little bit on people's, do I dare say, how educated somebody is and understanding what culture is all about. But generally speaking, the climate over there now with all the migration issues are such now that you coming from a country like that, you have a tough road to hoe.
Okay. Have any of your thoughts changed during the discussion? Has it caused you further reflection? You don't have to answer that one, but think about it. Has the discussion at all in any way shaped? It's a very small, very finite based example in this workshop. But think about, though, how discussions can be framed as the instructors, how we can ourselves be better in setting things up so there's not confusion. But then moving into that, let's talking about how we are going to be fostering these diverse discussions. How are we going to do that? Yes. And your name? It's for the online folks.
My name is Michael.
Yes, Michael.
I'm just curious what your thoughts are as a person who, if you were asked to stand in one of the corners, which one you would have stood in.
I am letting you all make your own decisions. Because it will be different for everyone based on their own experience. But to ask how are we going to foster a diverse discussion? Channel a little Shakespeare. Where it says, to be or not to be, that is the question. Well, for us, it's to be or not to be. How is my teaching? The V, what are we talking about? Well, variety of student participants. We also want viewpoint diversity being expressed and played out. So how are we going to get a variety of students? What are some thoughts? How would you get a variety of students to participate? Yes, and your name?
Agassiz.
Isaiah?
Yeah. I think the best way to get those people, touch those people, is kind of making a relation with their life, which is primarily requires to approach them not in that way, instead of discriminating somehow. And also the point, I believe they miss that, I'm a foreigner. My English is not my first language. So whenever I feel that I'm so away from my mother language, I feel that it's not okay. So this is a part of my identity, like everybody else's. So I need to continue this to continue my academic studies. So this is a way of breathing. We need to keep in this mind, but I totally understand the expectation, guys. You have been living several years here. You need to be improved your English. Please participate with English. So we need to be somewhere in the balance, I guess.
Somewhere in balance. But you're saying, I say right? Did I say your name right? Your name?
Agassiz, yeah.
Agassiz. So you're saying you get to have to know them, make a connection with the students.
Make a connection, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And again, we're broadening out to think of our students in our own classrooms right now. Yes, make a connection. And with that, one of the best ways to make a connection is to ask yourself, what's in the name? Everything. If you know students' names, there's a connection, especially if you think of it in a larger class, or even in a setting like here. It'd be extremely hard for me, for example, just today alone, to know everybody's names, even if we were to spend the time to go through that. But in a setting like this, or even in a larger lecture, maybe 80 students, it's possible to get to know them. It takes time. You have to invest. But what's in a name? It does make a connection. I put the rows up here to channel, Romeo and Juliet. What's in a name? It will help you think, to remember what's in a name. Keep that in mind as you are teaching. Know your students' names. Make the connections, as Isaiah was saying. What's in a name? Know their names. Make that connection. Second, it's another way to have a variety of students. And I put this comic up here. If you can see it, it says the perfect European should be. This is a cutout from a bunch of different ones. But it says available as a Belgian. And basically it's intended as a joke. Why? Because Belgians are on vacation a lot. You have some government workers who have 6 months vacation a year, paid vacation. So they're gone, they're not there, and that's the running joke for many who live in Belgium. All right, we're available as a Belgian. But what then are we supposed to take from that to our own ways of fostering a variety of students participating in our classes? We have to ourselves be accessible, approachable, and available. We can be the most accessible and approachable people when people say, oh yeah, you're nice, I can talk to you. But if we're not available for our students, are they going to talk to us? Are they going to want to participate? Are they going to feel comfortable in the classroom talking? Whereas if they know us, they have a connection. We're there maybe 10 minutes before class. We're able to talk to people, get to know them, get to maybe understand activities that they're in. Have some students who are varsity athletes, others who are involved with drama, other things here on campus. Just talking with them makes a connection, and you'll see and you'll notice a jump in participation by those students just taking time before or after class. Having office hours. How do you get people to come to office hours, though? That is a challenge. Are people going to come? Sometimes you ask, well, do I really want them to come? I have a lot of things I got to do. But teaching is part of what we're doing. If we are aspiring to academic careers, teaching is one thing we've signed up for. And we should want to do it justice to our students. They will increasingly participate. They will increasingly be active if we are accessible, approachable, and available. Anyone know what this map is about, what it's showing? The lines are between Los Angeles and Paris. Well, it's supposed to be Paris. It did it slightly off. Yes, and your name?
Drew.
Drew.
So this is just a guess, but this is like a map projection, right? So it's not like the actual thing. So like the straight line is just like the shortest way it looks on a map, but guessing the red line is like an actual great circle, so it's actually the shortest given the spherical nature of the Earth.
Yes, Drew. So you're talking about exactly right. So you may be able to get from point A to B just going straight across, even though the Earth's curved. But the great circle, you mentioned that. The great circle is going for the minimum distance between 2 points. It's a spherical surface. Keep in mind the great circle. Minimize the distance between you and the students. Move around the classroom. When people are commenting, someone comments over in the corner. Do you just stay in the same spot? Do you hide at the podium and just stay here? Okay. Yes. Oh, you made a comment there in the back. I can't really see you, but I saw a hand go up. That really worked. Think of my own experience. I had a professor in undergrad. He was at the podium the entire time. Never really moved. He'd always ask, any comments? What are your thoughts? You'd raise your hand and you'd say something, but while you were talking, he would look down at his notes, nod his head. As soon as this person stopped talking, he let up, thank you. Any other thoughts? Then the same thing, the process would repeat itself. Another person would comment, look down, thank you, and he'd move on. After about 2 months in the semester, everyone's like, whatever, why are we going to comment? What's the point? There was no discussion. The students who would participate, maybe there were one or two who, again, it's been a while since I've been in there, but thinking back, it wasn't one where you wanted to participate. Whereas conversely, other professors who come, they've been there, they approach. You might be sitting towards the back of the class, but they'll at least move somewhat towards you. They'll make eye contact with you. They'll engage with you. As you're talking, they're minimizing the distance. Their body language is conveying that they want you to be there, to be involved. That you as the instructor, you care about that student, so therefore they will be more comfortable sharing either an answer to a question or asking a question that many other people in the class may have themselves. Other tools, though, you can think of for increasing variety of students. What are some other tools that you can think of? I've just touched on 3. What else? Yes.
My name is Maisha, but setting ground rules in the beginning to let people know that diverse opinions or interpretations of documents will be respected, even if you don't necessarily agree with the interpretation.
Thank you, Maisha. So what would you recommend in terms of trying to set the ground rule? What's a good way of doing that?
So I'll be teaching a course on Jim Crow, which is a hot topic. So just inviting my students to engage with actual documents and the readings rather than their own personal opinions. So grounding conversation in the actual course material rather than ideology or opinion.
Thank you. Thanks, Aisha. Other thoughts? Yes, please. And sorry, the microphone's making its way.
I'm Barbara Anderson. One thing that I like to do, I do have a number of international students, which is always exciting and fun to me because you can't learn about other places, even though I've traveled quite a bit, but you learn more from talking with the students and working with them. But if I want them to talk more, I have to prime the pump in that we have a certain reading. I'm teaching English. So they will work in small groups, or I'll have 2 or 3 people working on one aspect of the reading, doing the close reading or looking at one element. And I'll ask them to talk among themselves. And then I'll say, okay, you need a scribe and you need a spokesperson. And you guys choose who's going to do the talking. And so as we do that throughout the semester and make sure, a little mental note there, that I ask them to, I regroup them into different, I make sure that I'm taking my international students and pairing them with other native speakers of English to facilitate a conversation so they have a chance to practice. But also making sure that I'm always pairing and changing up. I don't always allow them to go to this person to the right of the, who's sitting right there next to them. I move them around. And it's kind of fun for them too because they get up and have to move. And I said, this is your chance to meet other people. So by always putting them in these little new groups, new associations, but having them serve different roles as either the scribe or the person who's going to talk and explain what other people have said. And then, of course, we always say, did he get that right? Or is there anything that she left out that you want to add? And I think they're more comfortable with having somebody go first or someone lead, and then they follow with that.
Thank you, Barbara. That's an excellent point. You mix it up. You make movement of people, get to know other people. They also are in smaller groups. That's a fantastic way of doing it because people might feel more comfortable talking in a group of 3 to 4 folks rather than in a setting here. I think we have 44, 45 in this room today. Thank you. Yes, it's Victoria? Kristen, sorry, Victoria was.
I actually just have a question.
Yes.
So how does the role of participation points, so like when that's a critical component of the syllabus, how does that influence these factors like variety? Does that enhance it from other people's experiences?
So Kristen's question, how does that help having participation points to get a variety of students participating? Does anyone do participation points in their own? How does that play out?
Usually I use it as a tool to enforce these kind of discussions. Like some students are kind of, they can not want to be in these discussions. Maybe they're a little shy, but if they have a grade component, then that brings, the mathematics in their brain. Oh, well, I have to be in this discussion in order to get a good grade. And that just kind of gets them started to start that discussion.
All right, so emphasizing and re-emphasizing to get a good grade, you have to participate. Thanks, Tracy. That's a good point. Some people will make a syllabus and their grading structure where unless someone's participating, you cannot get an A. It's plain and simple. And that works with some others like, I don't care, I'll take the B. I'm fine with it. I don't want to talk. But that is something that you can definitely do and re-emphasize. So other successes that maybe you've had. Or perhaps what about failures? Of things you've tried to increase the variety of students talking, participating, that either have worked well or not so much. Yes.
I have a failure. So I teach in the social work department, and most often my students kind of present a pretty singular view. And because we talk a lot about kind of rates-based issues, I kind of worry that maybe somebody who might have a strong opinion that's different or a different point of view might not want to share that for fear of being called like prejudiced in some way. So I started saying, well, what would an opposite perspective say? And I think maybe that was the wrong decision, right? Like I think taking away that ownership of the idea, I thought that would allow more people to engage with diverse perspectives. It's just like, well, what would a different perspective say? But in retrospect, I think that was not successful, and I think I should have kind of continued to let students own their own ideas.
Okay, thinking it was Amanda?
Amanda.
Okay, thank you, Amanda. Do we have any online comments, anyone wanting to participate that way?
Jared had a success. He has students post questions online or via some tech like Padlet to get the people who do not want to voice out loud.
All right, using technology. Anyone ever use Top Hat, for example? They can get participation points. You can set it up with the participation points online, and you can see the responses and go through the responses in class. It can be anonymous. That's a way of getting at least people to participate. And you can track, back to Tracy's point of a grade, you can track because it will register and log in. There's other technology tools as well. So that's a variety of student participation. And somewhat to Amanda's point with the viewpoint diversity, what are we going to do about viewpoint diversity? Well, one, do we allow for it in our class? Are we allowing there to be different points of view? Or is it, this is what it is what it is, it's what it is? That makes sense?
No, that doesn't make sense. I mean, I can have a different viewpoint from you, so how do you allow or not?
So that's what I'm saying is, do we as instructors, are we allowing different viewpoints to come up?
You have no right to no allow, because not allow anything. I mean,
No, I understand you. So your perspective is saying, well, you have no right to not let other people speak. But meaning, are we
letting them know that you guys can say your point of view? Is that, do I understand right now?
No, I think what you're saying, yes, you can say, is there another point of view? But meaning, how are we allowing it? Are we making it so that there can be diverse viewpoints? Correct. Back to Amanda's point, some people may not want to share something because it might, with fear of being called out or labeled something else. Meaning, what's the tone we're setting as instructors? Are we allowing for viewpoint diversity? Make sense?
Yeah.
Thanks. Yes.
I think
Yes.
I think the most important thing the teacher should do is like whether we have built the environment, like a safe environment, comfortable like environment for the student to speak. If like only the teacher you can say whatever you want, but the other students just don't like it. So how could the student say it? You know what I mean? It's like if the whole classroom they don't allow the free speech, and it's something different from them. So how students speak?
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And that was actually one thing in terms of a safe space. Are we having a safe space for people to share their different viewpoints? Why might we not allow some viewpoints to be shared? Back to one of the questions that was up here, why not? Maybe perhaps fear of offending some. The survey, I appreciate you doing the survey. I think we had about 54 responses. I think there's 70 or so participants total, including online. There was a fairly sizable chunk, about 25-30%, said I limit actually what we're allowed to say because I don't want to offend. So that does play a role ourselves as instructors. Are we going to allow viewpoint diversity? And in terms of safe spaces, we're going to watch a clip here by Van Jones. Barbara.
I was just going to say that what I found, I work with freshmen and then upperclassmen. And what you're going to find with freshmen, especially in the English course, is that what I've discovered, that me personally, if I put out there my idea of what something means or what I think is going on. They're very, freshman-like in that they try to align with that because they're perceiving me as the teacher. So therefore, my interpretation that must be accurate. Therefore, this is the way I need to see this because I'm sure it'll be on a test or some other thing where I need to have the right answer. So I've learned to not phrase it that way so much to say, all right, let's take a look at this line. What are some different ways that this could be read or interpreted? Where are the many different ways? It might not be the way that you see it, but how might someone see this? In other words, just trying not to color it a certain way or tone or aspect just yet, because I want them to throw out whatever they see there and not necessarily what I just led them in this direction.
Thank you,
as the
Barbara.
instructor.
Thank you. And
Maisha.
Maisha.
I guess I just have a question about what to do in safe spaces when students are reading certain opinions or ideologies
Exactly. We're
on
getting
TV.
to that.
Okay,
Yeah,
sorry.
no, you're thinking like right along the right track. And with that, I was just mentioning, we're going to watch this brief video by Van Jones. So Van Jones, he is some would say he's far left. He phrases himself as liberal. He's speaking at a forum, if you will, for liberal activists, hosted by David Axelrod, who is President Obama's chief strategist. And so when you hear in his reference, he's the first beginning roughly of the clip, which we're going to skip, he's basically saying, look, I have different views on safe spaces. It gets some people will get him in trouble saying this. I get a lot of flack for it. People like me still at least listen to what I have to say and they'll at least tolerate it. So we're going to listen ourselves. What is he saying about safe spaces? And how is it going to relate to our views on viewpoint diversity?
There are two ideas about safe spaces. One is a very good idea and one is a terrible idea. The idea of being physically safe on a campus, not being subjected to sexual harassment and physical abuse or something like that, or being targeted specifically personally for some kind of hate speech, you are an N-word or whatever, perfectly fine with that. Perfectly fine with that. But there's another view that is now, I think, ascendant, which I think is just a horrible view, which is that I need to be safe ideologically. I need to be safe emotionally. I just need to feel good all the time. And if someone says something that I don't like, that is a problem for everybody else, including the administration. And I think that is a terrible idea for the following reason. I don't want you to be safe ideologically. I don't want you to be safe emotionally. I want you to be strong. That's different. I'm not going to pave the jungle for you. Put on some boots and learn how to deal with adversity. I'm not going to take all the weights out of the gym. That's the whole point of the gym. This is the gym. You can't live on a campus where people say stuff you don't like, and these people can't fire you. They can't arrest you. They can't beat you up. They can just say stuff you don't like, and you get to say stuff back. And this you cannot bear. This is ridiculous BS liberals. My parents and Monica Elizabeth Peake's parents, hello Monica, were marched. They dealt with fire hoses. They dealt with dogs. They dealt with beatings. You can't deal with a mean tweet? You are creating a kind of liberalism that the minute it crosses the street into the real world is not just useless, but obnoxious and dangerous. I want you to be offended every single day on this campus. I want you to be deeply aggrieved and offended and upset, and then to learn how to speak back. Because that's what we need from you in these communities.
So it's perspective, to be offended, to be aggrieved, and learn how to fight back. Think of it in terms of the safe spaces. Apologize, it's not advancing. Think of it sparring. Sparring, it's an environment. You are verbally sparring. You're engaging in debate in a protected way. As he said, you won't be arrested. You won't be fired. There are going to be ways that you'll be able to learn and internalize. There's the argument. Why do I agree or disagree? He says, and fight back if it is to your opinion, wanting to fight back on that opinion or not. Sparring, anyone do martial arts? Or boxing, anything? You're not in there to hurt people. Some things may hurt. You may get hit, you're wearing a helmet. It's like, oh man, I'm gonna feel that for a bit. But it's a protected environment. You have supervision. As you can see in the back, they're there paying attention. As instructors, are we allowing the verbal sparring to occur? Are we allowing sometimes offenses? But those offenses, is it to the ideas or is it attacks on the person? So to Maisha's comment, what do you do if it's a sensitive topic? That's a fantastic question. What do you do with sensitive topics? How are you going to go about that? Well, one, you're going to have to challenge the ideas. This is Hannah Holborn Gray. She was the president of the University of Chicago from, I believe, the late 1970s to the early 1990s. Her father was, so she was born in Germany. Her father, Hanno Holborn, was an academic. He fled because the Nazi regime was coming into power. He disagreed with them. So he fled with his family, including a 2-year-old Hannah. They came to the United States. The Nazi party summarily dismissed him from his post afterwards, but she said education should not be intended to make people comfortable. It is meant to make them think. How are we going to think if our ideas aren't being challenged? If we're not ourselves being able to have to articulate why we believe one thing or another, why an argument is correct or incorrect. But with that, there are, of course, rules. This is Dennis Skinner. He's a member of Parliament. The background to this, David Cameron, the former Prime Minister, he was the Prime Minister at this point in time in a debate. The Panama Papers came out. Anyone heard of the Panama Papers? Basically, it's a bunch of people in government or civil service around the world who had offshore accounts. They're profiting from certain things. So David Cameron comes to basically address allegations against him personally. This Dennis Skinner, he's going to comment on it.
Does the Prime Minister recall that at the time after he became Prime Minister under the coalition, and at the time when he was dividing the nation between strivers and scroungers, I asked him a very important question about the windfall he received when he wrote off the mortgage of the premises in Notting Hill. And I said to him he didn't write off the mortgage of the one the taxpayers were helping to pay for at Oxford. I didn't receive a proper answer then. Maybe Dodgy Dave will answer it now. And by the way,
Order. I must ask the honourable gentleman, order. Don't require any assistance from some junior minister. An absurd proposition. I invite the honourable gentleman to withdraw that adjective that he used a moment ago. He's perfectly capable of asking his question without using that word. It is up to him, but if he doesn't wish to withdraw it, I can't reasonably ask the Prime Minister to answer the question. All he has to do is withdraw that word and think of another. Sorry?
So then there's a little back and forth. What word? Dodgy, which is basically like scoundrel. I mean, so what happens next is he says, all right, well, I'll say again, dodgy Dave, and he goes right back at him. So the presiding officer says, okay, you have to leave today. You're out of Parliament the rest of the day. You can't be here, and your question won't be answered. So we are keeping a safe space by not allowing attacks on our students. Attacks, ad hominem attacks, where you're going after the person. Absolutely deconstruct, go about the ideas, but don't allow attacks. Don't allow students to be attacking others. Just think like the parliamentarian. No, order. You can even do the British accent if you want to as well. But that's how you're going to be able to, again, keep a safe space for your students. Also, though, avoiding attacks, do you have to simply use dodgy or another word like that to have it be considered an attack? Think about it for a moment. Does it have to be something so overt? Why not?
Because you could just be making fun of someone. You could just be deriding someone, which, in a different way is equally as bad.
So making fun of someone, deriding someone, maybe the manner of your speech, the tone. How else? Here's an example. I was in a class, we were reading a series of articles. One article in particular, I wholeheartedly disagreed with. One, because I had read other articles that contradicted its findings. Two, I lived in the area for 6 years that was basically this point of the article. Granted, I lived about 15 miles away, but generally the same area. Many of my relatives lived there as well. So in the class, the discussion, I'm expressing my ideas, why I think that article's wrong. I'm articulating, here's why, here's why, here's why. Points I had reasoned out, and I was citing to other articles. Well, what is the professor's response? Well, you don't get it because you're privileged. That was the statement. It's like, excuse me. That has nothing to do with it. I basically said, here's why I think this is wrong. If you disagree with me, then tell me why. Or look at the articles that I've talked about, and then we can come back to it. When you're labeling or categorizing somebody like that, it can create more of a hostile environment for them. But also you have to think about the perceptions or the basically notions we may have of someone. Think about, again, the idea of privilege for a moment. In law school, I had a classmate, we'll call him James. He was a first-generation graduate student, I believe actually even a first-generation college graduate, white male. Father was a janitor, mother was a factory worker. He's a white male, though. In the same class, we had, we'll call her Selena, Hispanic female. Father was a doctor, not just any general practitioner. He was a very high-end specialist doctor. Her mother was an attorney. She was raised in a very affluent environment. Many of her friends there at the law school, they had grown up together. So are we ourselves as instructors going to think, oh, this person comes from a certain background, that person a different background, simply by our own notions and biases? That's one thing we have to make sure we don't do if we want to avoid attacks, even in terms of the ideas. The professor who said, oh, you don't get your privilege, he didn't know my background. He didn't know my experience with that particular issue. But you think of it in a broader term like a courtroom. This is the courtroom over at the law school. That bench in the back is from the Supreme Court here in South Carolina from the 1800s. In a courtroom, if you are arguing back and forth your point, Can you sit there and say, well, Your Honor, they're just wrong because they're wrong? No. You have to articulate and say why either they're wrong or why you're right. As a plaintiff attorney, you have to say, here's why we win, X, Y, Z. The defense attorney, of course, will say, no, A, B, C prevent you from winning. You have to be ground down in the facts. And so the classroom is going to be a safe space to be challenging ideas, to exchanging these ideas, but also making students aware of competing ideas. They may not know that there's competing ideas. But we have an obligation, if we want diverse viewpoints, if we want people to critically think, why are certain ideas out of favor and others more in favor? I'm putting this up here deliberately because of that. Anyone know who these two folks are?
The one on the right is Darwin.
The one on the right is Darwin.
I don't know.
Lamar, is that Lamarck?
On the left is Louis Agassiz. They're contemporaries. Louis Agassiz is a Swiss-American scientist known as the father of the Ice Age. In his work, he's the one who's credited with discovering the historical ice ages. Darwin, we know, theory of evolution. They were contemporaries. They were rivals. Why? Well, Agassiz, he was very much a believer in creation. His dissertation actually was on female superiority because they were the later creation. That was his dissertation point. Darwin and him, they completely disagreed, but they had the utmost respect for one another and they stood by their work and the primary sources that they were studying to convey and advocate their points. Darwin even said of Agassiz, wow, he's worth 3 academics at Harvard. He's amazing. Agassiz similarly had high regard for Darwin. It stayed in the ideas in their debates. So for us, we don't want to fear debate. Debate is a healthy thing. It will allow our students to critically think, critically engage. Introduce competing perspectives. There's going to be some competing perspective or competing methodologies in most everything. My daughters, in math now, they're introduced, she's in 5th grade. They introduce them to all sorts of different ways to do long division. I'm like, oh, why? You just do it this way and it works. Really. But it's actually, if you think about it, somewhat refreshing because you know what? Maybe what works and clicks for me doesn't click for my daughter. So she's being able to see different ways of approaching something and thinking for herself what works for her. Same thing with our students on a series of issues. Some things, of course, there's no debate. If you're a math instructor, 1 + 1 is 2. I'm not going to debate that. But by and large, especially if there's theories, those of you in the hard sciences, a lot is theory. You can question, you can challenge. Why? There's very few laws. The law of gravity, a few others. In anything, there's going to be competing perspectives. Why don't we then go to the original source material? I think that was Maisha's point about the Jim Crow. What are you going to go to? You're going to use the material. Let them read it and come to their own conclusions. That's then, I think, back to your question of how are you going to handle the debate and going on? You provide opposing viewpoints.
My question was actually, what do you do when students ascribe a certain viewpoint to you because of like what you look like or what they perceive your privilege to be?
So the question, what do you do then because of what people are going to think? I think that goes back to Rebecca's, right? No, Barbara, I'm so sorry. Barbara's point is allowing them to come out and say what are they going to do rather than it's the manner of how we present it.
But that
I know that doesn't
isn't
give your
this-
question exactly of, well, how do you, what they might ascribe to you?
Yeah, based on race, gender, age, and all these other categories of diversity. So we're trying to facilitate discussion a certain way as instructors, and we're talking about it in one direction, but I'm also thinking about it in the other direction.
So what are some thoughts on that? What are you going to do in situations like that?
I mean, I remind my students constantly that, give them concrete examples that intra-group variation is just as pronounced as the intergroup variation. So just because somebody is, you know, an Asian female doesn't mean that she'll be functioning like all Asian female, or there is even such a thing as like the Asian female, right? So intragroup variation is important to highlight and to remind students of.
Excellent example, intergroup variation. One example you could point to concretely, in southern Belgium, the economic conditions are roughly the same as northern France. High unemployment, closed down factories, large-scale migrants coming into the area. Northern France is the hotbed for the National Front, the far-right party. In southern Belgium, it's non-existent. There are no nationalist parties. They're, by all measures of what would indicate nationalism, they're the same. They live literally, 10 miles from each other, but it's not there. Why? And it's because you do have to take people as individual. And just remind people of that. It's an excellent point. You have to let people know they're individual. And what they can come from us as the instructors is we're always going to let them know of a bunch of different perspectives. That's what they will come to understand from us as the instructor. And they can respect that. We talked about some others, but are there others besides those we've talked about? How do you then maintain it? You always stay in the arguments. I've briefly talked about it before with the court. Erwin Chemerinsky is the individual you see pictured on your left. John Eastman, the picture you see on your right. They used to have a continuing legal education program called the Dueling Deans. Dean Chemerinsky on the left, he's argued for the Supreme Court for liberal causes several times. Dean Eastman was the dean of Chapman Law School. He had clerked for, I think it was Justice Thomas. He was more right-wing ideology. They would compete and they would debate the issues on the cases, but they always understood the other side's arguments extremely well. And it was highly entertaining to watch because they each knew the other's arguments so well that they actually even could themselves argue the other side. They didn't, but they could. So we can keep that in mind in our own classes. Now, this kind of comes to the point, not exactly what Maisha's point is, but getting there. Well, what are then our own viewpoints? I think Barbara, right? Yes. Yes, what Barbara said earlier, what is it that we can do? How are we going to inspire or stifle discussion ourselves? What is the instructor's effect on class discussion? What are some actions that inspire discussion? We've talked about some. Barbara said, look, here's the passage. What are different interpretations? What are some other things that will inspire conversation?
I think connecting it to something that's relevant to the students, because I teach social policy, and for a lot of students that's very fudgy, and so making it applicable to how it matters to them, how it's specific to them, so that they can actually connect to it.
Excellent. You're making direct connections with something that's applicable. I had an instructor, she required us to read the newspaper and look for connections, items in class that would relate into that. We'd talk about it in class, and you're like, oh, this makes sense. So I make my students do the same sort of thing because they are making the connection. You can have those connections in your discussions. What are those maybe actions that stifle discussion?
I would think using really intense vocabulary for or against something. So if you as the instructor should probably speak more neutrally about a subject in order to maybe not suppress someone's opinion if they have an opposite opinion of you.
Thank you. And your name?
Marin.
Marin. So Marin's point, how are you going to use it? What are the words, the vocabulary you're using? How are you going to be introducing something so that it doesn't necessarily basically make someone say, I don't really want to say it. I don't feel comfortable. Maybe they'll have an idea of what they might be expecting the instructor to believe or other. Barbara.
I was going to say that, and this has stuck with me for at least 30 years, so and that's okay to be that old, that it would last that long. But I was in an economics class, and there wasn't a lot of discussion But I always like to, as you probably see now, I like to participate if I have something. So I made a comment in response to a question. And I remember the instructor looking at me and saying, well, now, wasn't that a really smart insight? Just that way. And I never opened my mouth again in that class for the remainder of the semester. And so I said to myself, always remember that, so that you would, before I respond or say anything to a student's remark, no matter how wild and crazy it might sound as to what they're seeing in a poem, not to pass a judgment on it in such a way that I would cause that person to shut up mentally and not disengaged. I mean, literally, I felt that awful about it, to where I do remember it, but I remember thinking, never do this to a student. Just don't do that.
That's a very good point. Similarly, on the flip side of that, if you want people then to continue to talk, then you can encourage that discussion. I had an instructor once, there were about 5 of us in the class, well, there was a class of like 40, but there were 5 of us who would regularly engage and interact with the professor, our verbal jousting. And one day after class, he's like, you know what? Can you take other classes for me too? I really like having you in there. And it was like, oh, that'd be nice. I didn't end up taking any more classes from him, but the recognition of, hey, you know what? Your comments are valued and appreciated. So that's, again, a good point. To the point earlier, I think it was Michael, he asked, well, what do I think about this? Well, what do you think about sharing your personal opinion? Is that going to inspire or stifle discussion? Yes.
I think that our personal opinion in the classroom, whether you're a student or a teacher, is valuable because it brings to light your specific life experiences, whatever those are. And going back to the idea of jousting and being strong in our opinions, that it's something we have to allow because it makes us stronger in our individual stance on what we believe, whatever that is. And it makes us stronger all together as a human. Does that make sense?
No,
so I think sharing our opinion is valid, but in turn, it's not necessarily about what we're sharing, it's how it's perceived by others. So we want to be able to be careful and not use that I think the girl right in front of me said the opinionated, strong language, either direction. Does that make sense?
It does. Yes, Tracy.
And also I think like sharing your own opinion, you can kind of set a model for your students. Like I am willing to put my opinion out there and defend my position. That's what I'm expecting for you to do. So
I can see that point too. I'm modeling my opinion. On the flip side, are they at the same level? What's the relationship?
I think it's also, it's important to say, like, to set up the expectation that they then are okay with challenging your positions.
No, understandable. So this was the survey results. Did you have a comment? Okay. This was our survey results. So how often do you share your personal opinion with your students? 24 of us say sometimes, 13 say never, and a few of the others. So there can be different reasons why or why not. Those who don't share their opinions, why is that? Or why would you guess, even if it's not what you necessarily answered? Why would you not share the opinion? Here's my take on it. The consequences of sharing an opinion, you are putting your thumb on the scale. You are an authority. Also in law, you have the concept of you can't unring the bell. You've had cases where it ends up being a mistrial because some attorney says something that they're not supposed to say, that they're prohibited from saying. The jury hears it, and as much as you want to say, jury, don't listen to that, they still heard it. They still know. And as instructors, we do have weight. Our students do look up to us, as Barbara's point, freshmen, oh yes, what is the professor saying? They will follow along with that. When you do share your opinions, you potentially are crossing over into advocating. when you're advocating in your classroom, I'm speaking only of the classroom, because advocacy definitely has a purpose. We research, we advocate for things. That's excellent to do. That's what we should be doing. We advocate in our communities. The classroom should be a different area. It should be a different space, a safe space, because if we are putting our thumb on the scale, if we are ringing the bell, so to speak, it makes it that much harder. A student, I get your point, Tracy, of the student like, okay, I'm gonna have to exchange back. But will they have the same sort of training? Will they want necessarily to fight back? We're running low on time, so I'm going to quickly, I'll come back to him if we have some time. But you have to think of our own confirmation bias. We may be ourselves, and it actually is something that happens in academia a lot. Think of a paper you submit for peer review or a grant proposal. If the reviewer, or even if you're the reviewer, has a similar ideology, a similar perspective, you are going to have an easier review on that paper. The same thing is happening and can happen in the classroom. So we have to consider our own biases. This is Greg Watson, probably one of the most influential Americans you've never, ever heard of. And other than today, you probably won't ever hear of him again. Greg Watson was a student at the University of Texas at Austin in the early 1980s. He was assigned to write a research paper on the US Constitution. It was a government class. He chose specifically the Constitution. He looked into amendments and he found, hey, there's an amendment that still is active. It hasn't been ratified, and it's on congressional pay raises. So if we get enough states to pass it, then they won't be able to keep raising their pay all the time. This is a great idea. He writes his paper. What does he get? A C. The instructor's like, whatever, dude, you're so wrong. Greg Watson says, no, I'm not. I'm right. He fought on. Many students might not do that. He did. So what did he do? He started advocating. And he was advocating his idea, his belief, contacted state legislatures around the country. Some from Maine said, hey, that's a good idea. Let's ratify that amendment. So they did. Other states followed suit. In 1992, we had the 27th Amendment to the United States because his instructor said, whatever, dude, bad idea. And was the instructor right or wrong? Well, his point was well taken. He subsequently changed his grade 30 years later. So the happy ending for him. We are, again, though, getting out of time, or we basically are out of time, but really thank you so much for your participation. Our question and answer kind of occurred throughout. Be happy to talk any further questions you may have. Thank you for coming, and please fill out as well the feedback forms and evaluation. It helps the CTE know, it helps me know as well. Like I didn't set up the initial exercise as well as I hoped, for example, but your feedback is appreciated. Thank you so much.
Sam?